Well, welcome today. I am Margaret Krantz. I'm the Senior Director of Career and Professional Development in the Levitt Career Center at Hanover College. And today I'm going to be talking with you about interviewing. So the first thing that you need to know when you're interviewing is that there are some initial frames of reference that you need to bring in with you, some clarity that will help you to make all of my comments more useful. So when you are beginning to prepare to interview, ask yourself what your career goal is. And obviously, if you're invited to interview, then you know what that specific career is, but they're going to ask you how that job that you're applying for fits into your overall plans. That is an absolute thing that will come up. So it's a good idea to have thought through how this particular position matches what you are interested in, what you feel like you're good at, and how you might be able to contribute to that industry or that field over the long haul. And then next, if you have an interest, what have you ever done to test it? What kinds of experience have you had that are similar and related, so that you can prove to them that when you say you'd be good at it, you actually know what you're talking about. And in what way have you developed related skills? What are the assets that you bring that would make you effective quickly rather than sort of after an arduous, long training period? So what I'm going to be talking about today falls into roughly these bulleted areas. I'm going to suggest to you ways that you can learn more about the employer, ways that you can inform yourself about what the position is likely to require, how you can mine your own background for relevant skills and goals, and then how to take all that information and bind it into a good package that will impress the employer. So what I'm suggesting here is that you go off and look at a short video that I did a few months ago about researching employers. I have already given a lot of time to this, so rather than duplicating that video in this one, I'm going to give you sort of the high level view here and suggest that you go to this site. The way that you can find this video is go to careercenter.hanover.edu. And on the very first homepage, the very first bullet takes you to career-related videos. Just look for researching employers, and there you will be. So just to sort of recap what is in that video, there are some specific things about the employer that you want to learn about as you're preparing for your interview. If you can understand what the mission of the organization is, then you are better able to see if that's a mission that you buy into, that you would like to be a part of, and the ways that you might be able to contribute to it. How do you match their mission? Is it something that you want to support and give your time to? Where are they located? Is it a single location, or is it found in branches all across the country? Had a student once who said to a recruiter for Fifth Third Bank, "So are you located in Walmart?" And the recruiter was really offended by that. This student didn't even know who we were or what, they thought we were a grocery store. And they didn't understand that the student thought perhaps they had branches in Walmart. It was actually a legitimate question, but one that the student could have done some research for and found out. So know their locations. Any specific products or services that they do would be important for you to learn about. How their leadership is structured. Is it very hierarchical? Does it have a low, short career ladder from your position to the top? Is it owned by another organization, or does it own other organizations? Today I posted a job for English majors that I was just talking with Allegra about, that is through Wiley, which is a publishing company, but it's a subsidiary of Wiley. So the jobs are posted at wiley.com, but that doesn't mean it's exactly at Wiley. Hello, Mariah, good to see you. who are their competitors? It's often a really interesting thing to know who else is in the running for this, for these clients or these customers, or, what are their approaches? When I'm doing my research for employers, I don't just look up that organization, I also look up the competitors, because I might learn some interesting tricks or some insights or some points of distinction that are very helpful. Also find out about current events in the news. If they have had some, like let's say they posted fourth quarter losses this year, that's something that you would really want to know about. All the current events affecting this organization are going to be very important to them. If you're unaware of them, then they assume you're not really interested. What directions are they going to go? Do they have some drugs in the pipeline that that could be the next blockbuster? That kind of information is really helpful. And are they good community stewards? Are they active and well-known and well-liked in that community? Because that can make a difference to what it feels like to work for them as well. So that's just a high-level view of the kinds of information I think you need to know. I spell out all of that information much more thoroughly in my brief video about researching employers. But this next slide shows you some of the different sources of information for that. Everybody knows that you should go to the organization's website. Yes, you should. And you should read it way more thoroughly than you might imagine. Don't just look at the homepage, look at all the nested pages and try to get a sense of the corporate culture, the main emphases that they're focusing on at the moment. Definitely look at their website. Also look at LinkedIn, Facebook. Well, I've got those, social media in general, because that is the way that they are presenting themselves to the world and to potential candidates. Handshake, which Hanover subscribes to and you have already got an account for. Handshake also has information about organizations or employers, but it's got a more college student orientation to it. And I find it actually quite an interesting sort of spin on information that you can get. Google, of course, is always a good idea. If they've been in the news, that might be a way for you to discover what the tenor of that news is. Is it positive, negative, and so on? Glassdoor is, it gives you sort of behind the scenes gossipy view of what the organization is like. Are there people complaining about what the corporate culture is like? What were the interviews like? Those kinds of things. I always take Glassdoor with a grain of salt, frankly, but it could be interesting to you. If you're looking at a for-profit organization, it's really important to see how their stocks are performing. And Reuters is a site that helps investors decide where they want to invest their money. And so it's Reuters.com. It could be a good place for you to go to get current events. If you're trying to decide whether to invest in Eli Lilly, for example, looking at how their stock has been performing and seeing what kinds of things have gotten them into the news lately is a really good way for you to sort of be well informed when you're investing and also when you're interviewing. And it can lead to some really good questions. So Owler is a crowdsourced version of Reuters, really. And so it has organizations' web page or a page for various different organizations, but it's crowdsourced. I am allowed to add to it if I want to, sort of the way Wikipedia allows me to edit if I want to do it. And then for the not-for-profit side, if you're interested in working in a not-for-profit, these are the parallel to Reuters. Charity Navigator and GuideStar are places for philanthropists to decide to research not-for-profits and decide where they want to invest their money. I frankly make my decisions about my charitable contributions through Charity Navigator. I don't want to give my money to places that have a huge overhead. I want as much money that I'm donating as possible to go to the mission of the organization and not to slick brochures that get mailed out every 2 weeks. Does that all make sense to you guys? So I have more information about this again in that video, but this is a high level view just to sort of point out some of the things that you can learn about the employers and where you can learn it. Now does anybody have a question about that before I move on to the second type of research you need to do? Okay. The next thing you need to learn about is the position itself. And I am a believer in what I call triangulating to figure out what the truth is about something. And so I'm going to illustrate what I mean by triangulating in this way. So let's say that I am about to interview for a job and we're going to call this job a marketing position. And so I look at the job description that I am about to apply for and learn what they have said they are going to be looking for in that position. Well, in a lot of cases, their job ads are inadequate. They're too brief. They don't have enough detail or enough specific information to help somebody who isn't already in that field and doesn't have an insider's view about what it means. So even if they've done a poor job of advertising, that doesn't get you off the hook from needing to know what the job entails. So what I vote for is that you go to Google and research a job description. Just look up job description marketing manager or whatever it might be. And that will give you additional examples. And if you compare those examples, you can get to the point where you can see the things that they have in common. And that could be very helpful to you. For example, this first job description uses words like analytical and my projects, customer service, client viewpoint. And the second one says things like client relationship, project management twice, and strategy. So you can start to go, wow, it seems like project management is going to be a big part of this. And that relationship I build with clients is going to matter. And my analytical skills are going to be important. Do you see what I'm getting at? So you look for the things that are in common, and you also look for the gaps that the one you're applying for has, because those gaps are probably also things that you would be doing. And then you can also go to ONET, which is ONET Online. I always say, looks like 1 ton line, but it's ONET Online. And that will give you an overview of what that position is like nationally in sort of the general aggregate. It's not specific to an industry or specific to an employer within an industry, but it does give you a really pretty thorough look at it from a broader perspective. This is only a brief excerpt of everything that ONET had about this particular field. So it gives you an idea of what kinds of things that a marketing manager would do. And so that's what I mean by triangulating. You look at this thing, what does a marketing manager do, from 3 different standpoints, and you get a much more thorough view of it. And so I recommend that to you. Okay, so having said that, where do you go to actually do this kind of research? Well, some of the ideas that I suggest, look at postings, as I just showed you. You can get a good idea from job boards or from Indeed.com, which is a job search aggregator. It's a spider, goes out and looks at where jobs are posted and brings them to this one central clearinghouse. And then if you're interested in one, you click on it and it takes you back to the site where they originally found it. But that can give you a pretty broad array of different job openings to compare to. You can also, as I said, Google marketing manager job description. You can use ONET, which I just demonstrated. And I also recommend that you consider speaking to contacts in the field, because those are people who have a personal knowledge of it. And even better, if you can talk to somebody who's actually in that particular organization, they could give you a really good idea of it. When I said LinkedIn on here, I want to go spend a moment talking about that, because what LinkedIn will do, if you look up marketing manager on LinkedIn, then you're going to see people's actual profiles, and the fact that they're working as a marketing manager will in some cases be spelled out by bullets, not always, but sometimes. And another thing that's really helpful is that you can see what their career ladder is. So you can go, okay, before they were marketing manager, what were they doing then? You know, well, okay, they started out as an intern right at, when they were still in college. And then after they graduated, they became in an entry-level marketing position. Then they moved into brand management. Then they became, you know, so that you can see where they fit in their career ladder. How long did they stay in each of those positions? How many internships did they have in order to have been hired by this company? So I think LinkedIn is very useful when it comes to doing this kind of research. It's one of my favorite places to go for research, not so much for job search, but I love it for research. Okay, once you, well, maybe before I move on to this, does anybody have a question about learning about the position? Okay. Well, you've been gathering up a lot of information at this point. You've been learning about the employer. You've been learning about the position itself. And now, having done all of that, what I recommend is that you make 2 lists from that information. And the first list is the things that excite you about that job. Every time you learn something about the position or about the employer, you go, oh my gosh, that mission would be perfect for me. Bless you. Or every time you go, I feel like this thing that they need me to be able to do, they need me to be a good writer. And I have a lot of experience with writing. So as you're learning, go every time you get excited, gosh, I feel like I'd be good at this. I think I have a hope for it. Go stop yourself and go, wait, stop. What was it that just got me excited? Because that is a potential thing that you want to focus on in your interview. So the first list I want you to do is the stuff that excites you. Every time you feel like you click with them, your background, skills, and experience overlap with the skills, experience, and background that they are seeking, stop and write it down. Okay, I want you guys to be writing this down right now because I really care about it. Okay, and then second, as you're doing your research, anything that you're not clear about, where you're going, I don't know, I would have thought this other thing, or I'm seeking this particular thing and I'm not finding any mention of it. Or when I was doing my triangulation, I found out some interesting things from other job openings, but not for this one. Anytime it's fuzzy for you, you need to know more information. Make that second list of the things that are confusing, the fuzzy ones. You're trying to imagine yourself working for them, and you just don't have enough information to have that be clear. This second list becomes really important as you ask them questions. So I'm going to talk to you later on about how to ask good questions, but for now, I just want you to know as a placeholder that that second list is very, very important as you use it to come up with the questions you're going to be asking them. Do you have any questions for me at this point? Okay, so now as you take that first list, the things that excite you, start making some judgments about it. What are the things that you have learned that you think would make that they have said would be ideal attributes that they're seeking? What are the most important things that they're looking for? And how do you match those things? What are the ways that you have skills, experience, and personality, goals, and so on that would make you a strong candidate for them? And then try to boil those things down into 3 or 4 main points about yourself that show how you match them. And that explain how they match you. Their mission, their tasks, their products, their services are a good fit for you. That's what you're looking for at this point. And then once you have come up with those 3 or 4 main points where you overlap, then go back through your background, comb through it, and come up with a couple of stories or illustrations to show how you match them. So for example, if this were a position that required organizational skills, leadership, and communication skills, then you need to, and you feel like those are 3 of your strengths, ways that you overlap with the employer, then what you need to do is come up with examples, fully fleshed out examples of 2 times when you've demonstrated that for each of your skills. And so, for example, with organizational skills, it's possible that you may have had to set up meetings for a club that you're in, and that could be really complicated because people in your club are highly involved, and it's really hard to find a time when all of you can meet simultaneously. So your organizational skills were essential in being able to meet at all. Another example of your organizational skills might be that you've been on class projects and you're the person who makes sure that you have time set aside when you're actually going to meet, who's going to handle which project and or which aspect of the project, and what time they're going to turn that in, and how it's all going to be woven together, and how you're going to meet with the professor at some point to make sure that you're on track. Do you see all of those things being organizational? So in each case, you come up with 2 examples for your background and how you feel like you are qualified. And then once you have come up with those examples, you need to develop a story around it. So Eli Lilly is an example of a company that actually they require people in interviews to tell stories about themselves. And they call that STAR interviewing, which is an acronym I'm going to go over with you in a second. Another word for this style of interviewing that requires you to tell a story is behavioral interviewing, where the theory is that the best indicator of your future behavior is your past behavior. So rather than saying, tell me about a time, or rather than saying, how do you motivate people, which would give them sort of your theory of how people are motivated, they say, tell me about a time when you motivated people. And then you have to actually think back to an example of that and what the circumstances were, what your role was, how you did it, and what the results were. And I just gave you this summary. So STAR, as I said, is how Lilly refers to it. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. The situation, I've got an example here that I'm going to walk you through so you can see how this looks. So I think in this case, the situation and task end up being essentially the same thing. They're not particularly important. They're given to you, not things that you had an impact on. So you're a student ambassador. So as a student ambassador, I tailor my speech to each family by finding out what interests that student and their parents. And then I ask about any worries they may have. I learn in-depth information about each building we visit and the people who work there so that I can share relevant and helpful information. The result is over 75% of the tours that I've given have resulted in applications. Do you see how that plays out? So this person is trying to show that they are, this story could show communication skills, it could show sales or persuasion skills, a variety of different, teaching skills, for example, in terms of making your lessons specific to the students that you're talking to. So you can use a story that you've come up with for lots of different purposes. And that actually, going back to the previous slide, is why I suggest you have 2 stories for each of your strengths. Because this always sounds so strange to students as I explain it to them. But when an employer is interviewing you and they ask you for this kind of example, they'll say something like, tell me about your experience in handling customer complaints. And you give a story about your being a student ambassador and having somebody really grouchy on the tour. And then you've used your student ambassador story. So later on, you want to use a student ambassador story and it's already gone. That actually does happen. So if you have 2 stories to illustrate each strength, what happens is that you become way more familiar with how to tell a good, purposeful story. And you develop what I think of as a library of stories in your head that you can then mix and match for different purposes as they come up. Now, one of the things that I want you to be aware of, in fact, I want you to, everybody hold up your pen. Are you, Mariah, have you been typing on your computer or are you taking notes? Okay, whatever way you're taking notes, what I want you to write down right now is, my brain is a liar. My brain is a liar. And the reason for that is that you won't want to write these stories down because you're gonna go, she said I need to come up with 2 stories for each of my strengths. I know one of my strengths that I'm going to want to convey is my organizational skills. So let me see. Okay, yeah, I can talk about that time that I was setting up Greek meetings. And yeah, I think that's good. And let's move on to the next one. And meanwhile, your brain is telling you, hey, good job. You've just done that really well. And your brain is lying to you because what you need to do to write a good story is to focus on those action steps that I just laboriously typed up 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you would notice that you really, the thing that makes you stand out in an interview like this is to have the specific steps that you took. Because if I'm interviewing 6 candidates, the way that I'm going to be able to distinguish between them is how they handle their action steps. 6 different people will do it 6 different ways. And if you've told me a good story, then it's kind of like telling this elaborate joke. I need a punchline. You know, you've got me right here in the palm of your hand. I'm excited about this, all these steps you took. What happened? So the second thing that's really important about this answer is what happened as a result of your efforts. Don't forget to have a good result. Well, it's not easy to do any of that just off the top of your head. You really need to have some practice doing it ahead of time. And that's why I'm going over this in at such length. Okay, so now that I've told you that you need to come up with your main points, you need to figure out a couple of stories, a story for each of your 2 illustrations for your strengths. Then I want to go back to this triangulation that you've done on the position. Make sure that the points that you're making are relevant. Organization turns out to be something that they've said they want. It's customer service orientation, being detail oriented. If you're making a really strong case for something that isn't relevant, that's a good way to rule yourself out too. So you just always go back to the job and make sure that you're focusing on the things that they really care about. Okay. Now,
Can I ask a question real quick?
please, yes, please.
What do we do if like something that like in a story or whatnot, like we don't know the result? Like you use the example of like, oh, the person who's a, like, the tours ending up in an application. Like what if there's no way to know like our like
Your impact.
statistically our yeah.
Well, you might see that's part of the nice thing about planning it. That's a great question, Allegra. It's helpful to plan these in advance because that way you can choose stories that you do have an answer result for if possible. Or you might be able to contact the employer and say, hey, I'm just sort of thinking about my strengths before I do an interview. Could we talk through that thing I did? Did anything ever come of that? You know, I changed the filing system in the law firm. Are they still using the new system that I set up? What's been the impact of that? Has it helped? Oh, you found $300 worth of billable hours you had missed. That's really good for me to know. So if you can do that kind of work with it, that would be good. If you can't figure it out, then you may want to find a different illustration, or you may be able to find a less quantified version of it. For example, it's possible that your employer at least told you that she gets good feedback about the kind of impact that you have had, even if you don't know a hard number like 75% have applied. So there are different ways to give results, or different jobs that would provide results, or you can follow up and get results. Does that help?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to I'm trying to think about back up my own stuff, and I'm having a hard time thinking of anything. Like it's a lot of times like it's more like of a soft effect, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. If you want, you can hang on afterwards and we can look at a couple of those and see if there's something that I could help you with. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. I said something else that led me to make a point that I think is important, which is I said you could find a different example. Well, one thing that I recommend that you do is to try to diversify your examples as much as possible. So you wouldn't want to have every single one of them be your student ambassador experience. So if you can vary it based on employer or activity or, sports, the having some variety can make you look like a richer person in general. But if you have a choice between two examples and one of them is an employer in a related area and the other is anything else, it's usually the employment setting that they're going to relate to the most. So I'm sort of saying diversify, but give preeminence to the ones that are most closely related. Okay. Does that lead to any questions you might want to ask? Okay. This slide is telling you that you should always try to make your answers relevant. And when I say that, what I mean is you give your answer, you talk about your organizational skills, then relate your answer back to them. I believe that my organizational skills will help me to be a really effective employee at your organization, where you have mentioned that organization is a key factor that you're looking for. Does that follow? So connect it back to them. Show them why your answer is something that they should be interested in. Another way to look at that, which is one of my favorite things to say, and I've probably said it in other workshops with you guys, is always assume the question, so what? Why should I care? Why am I telling them this information? If you can help them to see the connection, they'll find that very compelling. And so when I'm giving mock interviews, I use this symbol all the time in my notes to somebody. This sort of means it's my mental way of imagining connect your answer back to them. And occasionally people do a really good job with that, but it's rare. Far more often I'm going, I need you to do a better job of that. You've just told me this interesting thing about yourself. And I can see that that's interesting, but I want you to make it explicitly clear that this is something that you imagine doing for them. Because when you do that, it helps them to see their job through your eyes. By making that connection, you're actually literally making a connection with them. You're showing them that this is something that you have imagined doing, that you think is something that they will care about, that you care enough to make that point, and it really it sells your interest in working for them. It's not neutral anymore. It's proactive. So I really, really recommend that every answer you give, if it's possible to say some way that you think it's going to help them, that can make your answer stronger. And if you're a typical student, you'll forget to do it at least half the time. So you won't be overdoing it. I think it's a really valuable technique. Okay, so again, when I was talking about making your answers relevant, another way that I look at it is for you to put blinders on. Try to, I think this is where students are, they fall into traps. An employer will look at your background and they'll see clues to other fields you might be interested in addition to the position that you're applying for right now. And they're going to go, looks to me like you don't want to be a pharmaceutical rep. Looks to me like you want to be a doctor. And if you're a typical student, you go, well, yeah, I am pre-med. I'm just applying for this until I get into med school. Well, you have just jumped into a pit that they dug for you. You have to put blinders on. While you are a 365 day a year person and you have all kinds of complexities about what your interests and passions are, as I do, that's not their business. They are hiring you to do this specific thing, and who you are is only relevant insofar as they would hire you to do it. So it is not lying to be selective about what you tell them. It's strategic. It is a good idea for you to rule out the truths about yourself, like, yeah, I am thinking about law school, or whatever. I only want to work here for a year before I move to Nashville. Whatever it is, that all those things that are not things relevant to your actually signing a contract with them, you don't bring up. So the way to put the blinders on is to program your brain as you're being asked questions to add one little phrase to the end of each question, which is at our organization. Tell us about yourself at Acme Company. What are your goals at Acme Company? What sets you apart at every single time? If you can have that on your mind, then you can make your answers much more relevant. So what are your 5-year goals? They don't want to know about you wanting to go back to law school. They want to know what your 5-year goals would be if you stayed with them for 5 years. And that's why I love going to LinkedIn, because you can see that career ladder and start to go, where do I fit in that career ladder? What are the aspects of it that seem like they would be good for me? Okay, so beneath what I've said here is, tell us about yourself. And that is a very common question that you're likely to get, and is a great way for you to get completely off track as you're interviewing. I think that a lot of times people hear that and it sounds like it's an invitation to give your whole background. So I have 3 dogs, 2 cats. I love to drink pina coladas at the beach. None of their business. They're not hiring you for any of those qualities. So you have to put your blinders on and go at Acme Company. And then you go back to your agenda. Do you remember how I talked to you guys about planning 3 or 4 main points about yourself that you wanted to be sure to tell them that were the ways that you overlap with them? That is the question, tell me about yourself. When they say that, they mean tell me your agenda. And it is the best strategy possible is to be narrowly focused in that. This is not an invitation to tell them your whole biography. It is to get to the point about hiring you for their job. So a way for you to sort of organize that in your brain is to sort of anticipate, well, you need these, and I have, for example, you need organizational skills. I have experience in setting up meetings and group projects. You need leadership skills. I have been a club leader, a trainer at work, and a leader in group projects. You are looking for somebody with strong communication skills. I've been a student ambassador at Hanover. I've led club meetings, and I'm on Student Senate, where I have to give presentations about my club and its constitution. So that is an answer to the tell me about yourself. It doesn't mention dogs, cats, or your drinking habits at any point. Okay. You guys, do you have any questions about this slide or what I've been saying for a little bit now?
Do you think it's appropriate to add something about yourself slightly personal to keep it light, to keep morale up during an interview, just to kind of share maybe one small factoid to go alongside all of the actual skill building things that you talk about?
Okay, so hold on, I'll get to you in a second, Mariah. I think that's a great question. What you're asking about is, can you let your personality shine through? And my feeling is, yes, you can. I know in a small way you're saying, normally the most effective way to let it shine through is through the things you're passionate about. So if you're telling them what your greatest strengths are and telling them stories about those in action, they're going to get to see your eyes light up and your voice get stronger and you're leaning forward, talking about the stuff you're excited about, and yet it's still relevant. So, and another thing is that kind of lets your voice come through is humor. So if there's a time when something that one of you two has said and it's funny, then it's good to show humor. Part of what they're trying to do is to see, are you a good potential colleague? Am I going to want to hang out with you or get to know you or introduce you to this team and have you become a part of it? Or are you going to annoy the heck out of us all the time? So I definitely like personality to shine through and passion, or enthusiasm, but I'm not sure about a factoid. It would depend on what it is. Do you want to share what you've got in mind, or did you not have something in mind yet?
I didn't have anything in mind. I was just kind of asking in general.
Yeah. I suppose you could say something. What'd you say?
That's good feedback.
Okay. All right. And then Mariah, you had a question as well?
I was just going to add on to that. I could see where he was thinking if he said something like that, that they might remember him by that, because if everybody comes in there and says, well, I've got organization skills and I've got great leadership and I've got communication skills, that it might help with the colleague aspect and them just remembering something off topic kind of.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't just saying that you would rattle off those 3 skills. I was saying, for example, I did this, this, and this to gain those skills.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay. But I think that that's a complex enough answer so that you probably aren't going to have a lot more air in the room that you can spend on anything else about yourself. But if you had something fun, something interesting, plus I'm a concert pianist, or, I love to go skiing in Zurich, some little add-on that was a factoid, I suppose. Yeah, you could do that. And sometimes what will happen is that it will become a point of connection. For example, I had somebody who was applying for an accounting position. She had really worked hard to be qualified to do accounting. And on her resume, she had that she was on the women's basketball team. And that was the thing everybody wanted to talk about. Hey, we have a company basketball team at Ernst & Young, and we really need a center. Can you, so she was going, I really wanted to talk about my accounting skills, and this person wants to talk about me as a center on the company basketball team. So sometimes you can have written some of those little things on your resume, and then that might be the thing that spurs them to ask about it. Another example is that I had a student who was going to an interview for medical school. And the medical school said, so what do you do in your free time? And don't say cross country. And he said cross country. And they said, oh, really? What are your times? So he got over the bubble or the hump of having to disappoint them by using the exact same thing that everybody else in medicine was using. But sometimes they can ask if they're not getting enough sense of your personality, they might say something like, so what animates you? What gets you up in the morning, and sort of invite that kind of thing. Okay, so good questions. Thank you, everybody. All right. So basically, that's how you answer one of the most common questions, and often a lead-off question. Tell me about yourself is often the first thing that they ask, or they say, so you're from Hanover, tell me about Hanover. one of those, or why did you choose Hanover? Something along those lines. Those are usually, especially if they go into the why did you choose Hanover, it's because it's supposed to be a grapefruit, a question that's really, you know, the answer to. It's not a surprise. You've already articulated it to other people. And so they're just trying to make you feel comfortable and like, oh, good, this isn't going to be scary at all. So those are often where they begin. Does anybody want me to talk about why did you choose Hanover before I move on to the next point I'm going to make? You guys good on that? Okay.
I guess, is that like a common question to ask? Like,
It is.
why you chose whatever school?
Yes, I think it is fairly common. And the reason for that, as I said, is that they want to make you comfortable. There isn't it's not like that doesn't constitute a hole that they've dug for you to fall into, like tell me about yourself, or it looks to me like you want to go into a different field. Is that true? Those are definite places that you can blow it. The why did you choose Hanover isn't meant to be one that trips you up or that puts you at a disadvantage. It's just that if you're choosing an answer, you probably had several reasons that you chose Hanover, and they're not equally meaningful to your audience. So you ought to be listening to yourself and making decisions about it. For example, you may have chosen Hanover in part because the small size meant that you could work directly with faculty and be intellectually challenged. And it may also be because your best friend came here and you thought it would be fun to be in the same spot, if you were flipping a coin. Well, those two reasons are not going to be equally appealing to employers. So if you have several reasons, try to rank them in terms of how this would help them to learn something about you that would make you show how qualified you are. Okay? Don't be completely naive about why, how you're coming across through your answers. You get to make some choices. Okay. So the most common question that you will get at interviews for the rest of your life is this one. Do you have any questions for me? Now, in a lot of cases, their questions are going to be, they'll ask you that question at the end of the interview. So before we conclude, do you have any questions for me? Sometimes it'll be at the beginning. Before we get started, do you have any questions? And sometimes it'll be in the middle. So let's just take a break here and catch up. Do you have any questions before we continue? So I can't promise you that it's going to be at the end, but it's most commonly there. And your questions for them really matter. All along, you've been asked to show them why you think that you're qualified for them. And now at this point, you're getting the opportunity to show them what you care about when you're deciding if they're a good fit for you. This is a mutual thing. The best relationships are formed with two parties that are attracted to each other. And this is very much that. So if you want to convince them that you're really enthusiastic about them and that this is a really good opportunity for you, showing them what you care about through your questions helps to cement that case. I've had employers say, good questions leave a good taste in my mouth. I'm left with this really positive impression. So good questions for them are, it's an art, I think. And it's kind of like also an extra credit question on an exam. If you're told, you're gonna have 5 questions on tomorrow's exam, and one of them will absolutely be this, you're going to study whatever that was. No matter what else you look at, you're going to focus on that because you're guaranteed that it's going to be on there. Well, I guarantee you that you will be asked, do you have any questions for us? And you can also bring those questions with you into your interview. This is assuming that we ever get back into face-to-face interviews. If you bring your interviews on a portfolio like that, they say, do you have any questions for me? And you open up your portfolio, pull it out, and yes, I do, right here. So an exercise that I suggest that you use to help you decide what questions to ask is to imagine that you're interviewing with two different organizations and they both make you an offer. Now you have to decide which of the two offers you're going to take. And you're going to go, God, I wish I had asked this or this and this thing about each of the employers so that I could make the best decision. My goal is to grow, into a new position above that one within 3 years. How likely is that kind of growth? Or I really want to have an opportunity to build up this particular skill set. Am I likely to be able to do that? Those kinds of things. And so I recommend that you come up with at least 4 questions for each employer. If you are told that you're going to be interviewing with 3 or 4 employers, then you need to come up with at least 10 questions overall. And I also recommend that you introduce those questions carefully, because that will help them to understand why you're asking it, and it can deliver more content about you and why you're good. So you have 2 ways of introducing your questions. One of them is to say, hey, I've already tried to find this answer, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find it. So in searching your website, I wasn't able to find this out. Could you tell me? That's sort of a way to do it. Or second, you can get your agenda across. As I mentioned earlier, I have really strong communication skills. And how would I be able to use that in your organization? I mean, these are general examples. You would do a better job with the specifics of your interview that you're preparing for, but it kind of gives you an idea of either have your introduction be about how you weren't able to find it despite your best efforts, or to touch back on a main strength that you want to remind them of, and then ask a question that grows out of that. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about that? I'm almost done. Okay. So there are some things that you're not allowed to ask about in a first interview. So you can't ask about salary, benefits, or perks, like, am I going to get a parking place, or anything like that. They're allowed to volunteer that information if they would want, but you can't ask it, because if you do ask about it, it ends up looking like that's why you're interviewing. You don't really care about the job. All you care about is that you're going to make money, and it falls flat. It's a cardinal rule that you don't do that in your first couple of interviews. If you're asked back for a third interview without having actually had, like a third day, not the third session of one day, but a third day, and you still haven't heard this information, then it would be okay for you to ask. So if you are given the opportunity to ask questions, you can't ask that, but it is possible that they may say, tell us about your salary requirements. And I vote that you boot that question back to them. So rather than saying, well, I need to get $50,000 a year, say, could you tell me what range you're working from? Typically, a brand new college student doesn't get to negotiate for upper boundaries of a range, because those are for people who have been out of school and have more education or more work experience than a brand new college graduate has. But I do have some information on the website about negotiating salaries and other benefits. And so I would suggest that you go to the student tab of the Levitt Career Center website, which is careercenter.hanover.edu. And that can help you not only to learn how to negotiate salaries, but also how to research common salaries. Okay, so sort of to recap about what we've talked about, hold on, let me go back. I recommend that you research the employer, the position, how your skills and goals overlap, and how to interview effectively. And I wanted to just suggest that you practice as much as possible. I am a believer in doing as many as 4 practices to really polish. So I give mock interviews in the Levitt Career Center, and we have alumni who give mock interviews as well. You could ask friends to ask you some questions. If you go to career fairs, you'll get a chance to be asked basic questions that could be helpful. If you videotape yourself in Zoom, then you can see how you come across and review it, or you can interview in front of a mirror. The more practice, the better, not because you're trying to memorize answers, but because the more practiced you are, the more you know how people respond to the points that you're making. What do they want to know more about? What did they get excited about? What were they confused about and ask you questions about? What seemed to bore them? When did you go on too long? And when did they keep drawing out additional information from you? All of that is stuff that you can learn through practice. And then when you go to the actual interview, you're better prepared. Okay, I recommend that you follow up with your interview to send thank you notes so that they can see that you follow through, and so that you can reiterate points that you think are really important or that you would like to underscore so that they can remember them about you. And in order for that to work, you need to do it quickly, like within a day or two. And you can email it or handwrite it, but make sure that either way, you proofread it correctly, because they might have really liked you. You might be their top candidate, but if you send them typographical errors, it can backfire on you. I use this as a sheet to score people as I'm doing mock interviews. These are factors that human resources alumni from Hanover have told me are really important. And so this is available on our website so that you can look at it. And I think it's helpful to help you to see sort of what are they looking for besides the actual content in my answers. And I have a guide, like I always have a guide for every occasion, and that's the Art of Interviewing, and it's also available from the website. So it walks you through all of the information that I've given you today and gives worksheets and examples. And so to find that information, you would go to careercenter.hanover.edu/publications, and you can see a whole list of the kinds of things we have there. Okay. I think that's my last slide. Do you guys have any questions for me right off the bat?
So when you said following up with a letter, is that something we should always do? I just applied and had an interview for a job at a hospital. It's a PRN job, so it's only as needed. It's not really a big job, but I didn't know if I should follow up with them.
I believe that anytime you're really interested in a position, you should always follow up with a letter. It shows that you're interested. So if this is something that you hope you will get, I would follow through. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
good question. Thank you. I hope that interview went well. Any other questions? Okay, well, hang on for just a minute and I'll be right back with you.